This meeting is being
This
recorded.
meeting is being recorded.
Welcome back to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast. We haven't talked a lot about baseball on the show, but with this topic, we're coming out swinging.
That was a miss. A swing and a miss right there to lead off the show.
I thought that was pretty creative. So
I feel like we bunted.
we bunted. I mean, bunting moves the runners over. So I mean, that's productive. It's all about how you look at it. I'm a glasses half full kind of guy.
Oh my God! Somebody stop him.
I got my dad jokes on full effect right now.
Yes, I can. I can see that. They even have visual aids. So will this
sorry
show
for the
pop off or pop out is the question.
Oh, see, now you're in on the action. But anyways, I mean, I feel sorry for our Spotify listeners because they're not going to be able to see like the visual evidence of our dad jokes. But the YouTubers, they're gonna have all the fun with this one.
I'm gonna tell everybody too. Like, if you can find the video feed of this for next week's show, you need to find a visual feed for next week's show.
Absolutely.
Because,
but anyways,
it's a hat show. It's a hat show, Les. If you
well,
know what I mean.
That's only right because every time we do a college preview, you always have like your head. You always flex the headgear. So I mean, that's only right.
Baby. It's
so,
coming.
That's right. I'm looking forward to it. So yes, next week we're doing our college football preview. But as for today's episode, not to get ahead of ourselves, we're doing the MLB Trade Deadline, which, Matt, I don't know about you, but I feel like it was very eventful.
It really was. And I mean, that's something that I've come to almost expect now because, when you pay attention to baseball, and anybody who watches baseball will tell you this, like there are always a flurry of moves, but they're like minor moves, little transactions. Some guy you haven't heard of who's in the bullpen of a good team goes to a better team. Some player who's bad goes to a good team we've never heard of. But this year, it seemed like there were a lot more seismic shifts. And it could have been even bigger, but some of the moves we all expected did not happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we didn't even get the Wilson Contreras trade. We were all expecting that, but it still felt like it was a huge trade deadline. And of course, there was one deal to rule them all as there is normally every deadline. And Les, I think you know what I'm talking about here. Zach Efron to the Yankees.
Oh yeah, that was the greatest move of the trade deadline. That ruled them all.
Question.
Yeah.
MLB Network just got into that one and wouldn't let it go all afternoon.
No, I mean, but of course, anytime you make a move to the Yankees, it's MLB Network's all over it. The Yankees are MLB Network's like baby. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and the Cubs and Yankees getting together for a trade, that's two historical franchises just exchanging a guy who's going to be huge down the stretch. And all right, this bit's old. Everyone knows I actually was talking about the Juan Soto trade because that ended up being, I think, even bigger than my mind could comprehend. I still don't know who's gone where.
Well, Juan Soto actually, yes, was absolutely the big storyline for the trade deadline. And my big question was, with him going to the Padres, I don't know how I feel about it. Matt, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, you cannot deny that the Padres and their ownership group are 1,010% all in on at least making this team the most entertaining thing in baseball. Fernando Tatis is out right now. He's coming back very soon. And even if this year doesn't work, injuries take their toll. Next season, you're looking at a middle part of your lineup with Juan Soto, who's 23, Fernando Tatis, who's very young, and the old man of the group, Manny Machado. There aren't many teams in baseball that can claim that they've got a big three in the middle of their lineup like that. And, Josh Bell, who they also got in the deal, the first baseman, was a great addition. But Les, that's what it appeals to me is like this is a move that shows a fan base that you're really into winning. I mean, we don't see a lot of power moves like this from San Diego, especially a city that's lost its football team due to revenue issues. This one is saying we're not going anywhere. We're staying and we're invested in this. But Les, here's the thing. I really don't think that this is going to elevate the Padres to World Series status this year. They're still 14 and a half games back in their division. They've been beaten by the Dodgers 2 or 3 times already in this weekend series. And like I said, I know Fernando Tatis is hurt. He's not back. They've still got some questions with the pitching staff. Blake Snell hasn't looked himself this year. Yu Darvish, while good, it can be up and down at times. Joe Musgrove, And they even traded Mackenzie Gore, who was getting there in a couple starts, to the Nationals as part of that deal. So this is a move that definitely creates star power. There's going to be a lot of buzz around him. And eventually, I do think it'll lead to winning. But as we've seen, baseball is a different animal. Baseball is a totally different animal. The Angels have arguably two of the most athletic, insane, amazing baseball players on the planet, and neither one of them has sniffed the playoffs at all, and they're not going to do it this year. So while it's great to have exciting players, it brings the fans in. It gets the media to pay attention to your squad. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are World Series right now. We're going to the World Series because baseball is just a crazy, crazy sport where anything can happen at any time, and it literally is a matter of spins of inches of a ball from being like two sides of a season, and that's what it is to me. But it's a great move for player empowerment. We all saw what happened after the Nationals and the home run derby. He turned down the offer. They didn't even bother to get him a charter plane back after he wins the home run derby. I'm sure that the Padres will be happy to pay whatever uh, Juan Soto wants when the free agency comes along, and they will just back the dump truck full of $100 bills to his house, and he's going to be happy to be with a team with an aggressive ownership group who wants to win now, who's going to surround him with good players, which is something that the Nationals probably just can't afford. Period to do, and it's a shame too because they did win a World Series with that, but baseball, even a sport with no salary cap, feels like money is the tightest thing to get. But with the Padres, California franchise, nice and sunny, good core already, throw in this guy. This guy could be the limit, but there's no guarantee in baseball.
You're absolutely right. There is no guarantee in baseball. However, I'm going to tell you why I disagree with that. Yes, they are 14 and a half games behind the Dodgers in the NL West, but they're in the second wild card position. You and I both know that when it comes to baseball, all you got to do is get to the playoffs. And if you get hot at the right time, it's a wrap. Like you said, they're getting Tatis back here sooner rather than later. The Soto trade, you add a once in a generation style player like Soto in that lineup as well. But that's not even, in my opinion, that wasn't even the move that convinced me on the Padres. Because if you remember, they acquired Josh Hader, who I believe is the best reliever in baseball. And that is the move I think that puts them over the top in this upcoming postseason because they currently have, let's see here, the eighth best. They're currently eighth overall in ERA. Not to mention you have a good reliever in Hader, and now you add all that firepower in the hitting lineup. I think the Padres have as good legitimate chance as any to get to the World Series. Yes, they're not going to win the NLS, but they don't have to. As long as they get to the postseason, they get hot at the right time, they're going to be fine. So I'm going to take it back to one of our NFL podcasts where we talked about the Rams and all the moves that they made. And the question was, do the Rams have a disappointing season if they don't win the Super Bowl? They ended up winning the Super Bowl, but your exact comments on that were, you don't make moves like that and not win the Super Bowl. And I feel like that logic for the Padres is the same thing. I think you don't make all these moves and you have to have World Series in your foreseeable future. That's just my opinion.
Right. But let's not forget, too, we could have had this conversation last year about the Padres.
Mm-hmm.
And instead, we got one of the epic collapses of baseball history, and they found themselves on the outside looking in and firing their manager. You're not wrong. I'm just saying that baseball is to me, it's even more different than football. And the thing about the
100%.
Josh Hader trade is, while I agree with you that it is a good move, Taylor Rogers, the guy they sent to Milwaukee in that deal, was already having an all-star caliber year as the Padres closer. So, to me, that trade felt more like strength for strength. Hader just wasn't fitting in with the Brewers anymore. Taylor Rogers is a very good young reliever. It made sense to make that deal because there were no losers, really.
Mm-hmm.
It was just trading one strength for another strength and seeing if someone fit in better with a new environment. So that's why I'm more interested in the offensive players trade. Because, like you said, they did have the eighth best ERA. They had a good closer. Acquiring Hader probably does make them better, but it doesn't make them worse either. And I don't think it made the Brewers worse either. Because, man, I don't want the Cardinals to catch the Brewers, but I would be okay with that.
Well, the Cardinals are currently in first place.
Oh, see? Dang
because
it.
we're currently up 6-4 right now. Barring obviously it's the middle of the fourth right now, so I don't want to jinx it by saying it going live on the podcast and saying it, but yeah, if we hold on to this lead, they sweep the Yankees this weekend.
Albert Pujols has ascended into the sun because Les spoke well about him.
Oh, there's a certain move that I'm going to talk about later, but obviously we have bigger topics to talk about. So are we good? So are we good on Soto?
Well, I think we've covered all we need to cover with Soto. So, of those two teams you just mentioned, where are we going to go next? We've got the Cardinals and we've got the Yankees.
If we're going those two, we got to talk about the Yankees because I think the biggest thing with the Yankees that if I heard anything at all, the one thing they had to do was get rid of Joey Gallo, and they did. So I think for me, they had an absolute win for the Yankees. Also, they picked up Andrew Benintendi from Kansas City. And of course, I can't talk about the Yankees without talking about them acquiring a former fan favorite of St. Louis, acquiring Harrison Bader, which
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and address that move real quick because that was involved in the Jordan Montgomery trade to St. Louis, which I was an absolute fan of. Real quick, so we'll kind of knock out St. Louis and New York at the same. I'll knock out my St. Louis and New York opinions all at the same time. Being a Cardinals fan, the only thing I really wanted out of this trade deadline was exactly what we did: pitchers and prospects. Good to go. So Jordan Montgomery, a 6'6" lefty with a 3.69 ERA and 21 starts in the AL East, couldn't ask for much better than that. You obviously hate to lose a fan favorite in Harrison Bader. However, plantar fasciitis, especially for a player that's so reliant on their speed, you can't expect him to be the same after that. So I think it was a good move. And of course, it gives Harrison a fresh start. So best of luck to him. But Montgomery has already looked good. His first start came obviously ironically against his former team, and he pitched a 5-inning shutout. So I'm happy with it. We needed it. Our road ERA needed major work. I think 8.32 was our road ERA, which is absolutely unacceptable. So, yeah, barring how the rest of the game goes today, the Cardinals are on the verge of back-to-back sweeps and have overtaken the Brewers for first place in the NL Central for the time being. But the Yankees, they added some outfielding depth, and even though they lost a pitcher like Montgomery, I still don't think it hurts them as much because they are the third best pitching team in baseball. So the Yankees still, I think, they got deeper in areas that they needed to do, and they didn't lose much of areas that they're already strong in.
I'm going to be honest with you. When it was 4 or 6 o'clock p.m., I'm still not used to that. And they announced the Harrison Bader for Montgomery trade. I was flabbergasted. I have no idea why the Yankees made that move at first. It seemed like it was a move. I thought it benefited the Cardinals. Yes, Jordan Montgomery fits in with that Cardinal aesthetic well. He's a big, strong pitcher. But Harrison Bader.
Were you about to say that Cardinal way? I bet you. I think you were.
Not. I said aesthetic, and aesthetic was in my head because I do not acknowledge that phrase's existence. So, Harrison Bader, though, I get why the Yankees did it. That was like the one spot defensively in their outfield that could use a little bit of help. And I think the guy playing it now is Aaron Hicks, and Aaron Hicks has been 0 for 35. It may be 38 now. I'm not sure. But he's 0 for 30 something in his last few batting plate appearances, and you just can't have that. You just can't have a guy going 0 for 30 in his last few batting appearances and expect something to happen like that. So I thought it was mostly a good defensive move for the Yankees, but the Jordan Montgomery trade made no sense to me for one reason only, and that was a trade the Yankees made earlier today, getting Frankie Montas and Lou Trevino. Like, if they would have kept those guys, they would have had one hell of a pitching staff with Montgomery, Servino, Cole. Luis Severino, however, has just gone on the DL again. And you trade a starting pitcher because you got a guy who may be better, but more is better when it comes to pitching in baseball. You want more good pitchers. You don't want to have 3 really good guys and then me pitching the game 5 of the ALDS because I'm going to get destroyed. So I thought that was the big move the Yankees made, was getting Frankie Montas, because it was like, to me, it was like an indication of we want depth in our pitching staff. The Effries trade was good too. That's also depth. They needed to get rid of Joey Gallo. He had just gone sour out there, and I think he's hit about 2 home runs now. Now that he's in the Dodger blue uniform or something incredible like that. So change of pace, I guess, for him. It's just weird to me that the Yankees would acquire a guy, acquire two pitchers who are both fairly good, acquire a third from the Cubs, and then just kind of, say, screw that. We're going to trade this really big, strong pitcher we've got for a center fielder who's going to help us defensively. It has to be better than 0 for 35 in his last few plate appearances. That's what it was for me. And I mean, the Yankees. You've talked about the Cardinals; they're your team, so I'm not gonna touch them because I don't want to say anything offensive.
All right,
But
for me.
but I think that move is just a absolute coup for the Cardinals because that's the one thing that they can use to make sure they stay in first place is having a really good rotation, and that's the one thing the Cardinals never seem to have like a want for is good starting pitching, even from like the strangest places. I'm sure they've got somebody AAA right now in Memphis who's just going to go absolutely off the chain here in a few weeks and strike out 28 batters or something. But because that just seems like the one thing the Cardinals always get right is pitching. They may go out and they sign Goldschmidt and Arenado and who else, but their pitchers are all homegrown. They're all pretty damn good. So adding another guy into that mix seems like a pretty good move. So, but yeah,
And that's really
the Yankees. I mean, they're the Yankees. They're going to get all the attention, and I think it's hilarious that in like one of the first games after the trade deadline, they absolutely get blasted with their ace Garrett Cole on the mound by another guy who was traded at the deadline, who I know fairly well. Why don't you tell the people about that trade? Let's go.
are you referring about a guy that left one of your teams?
Yes, and I'll miss him forever because I really enjoyed watching him pitch.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Luis Castillo, who was traded to the Mariners for 4 prospects. Matt, what are your thoughts on the Luis Castillo trade?
I loved it. I mean, the Reds have made it very clear that they don't care about what exactly happens this year. So you might as well hope for the best for the future. And the guys they got are just I've seen the highlights of Marte already, Noelle Marte already, and I am over the moon to have this guy in the Reds organization. I know the Reds have like 16 of the top shortstops in the history of baseball, in the history of baseball farm systems right now, or something, because they've got Ellie De La Cruz, they've got him, they've got a guy they acquired from the Twins in that trade. But man, it's just good to see like some real athletic guys coming up, hopefully really soon. Because in the midst of an abysmal season, you look for things that are little bright spots, and that's a little bright spot for me. Thinking about this team being young already with the guys in the majors, outside of Joey Votto, who I think is going to be 85 next year, and but I do love him. He still bangs, believe it or not, and I like the youth direction they're going to. The one thing that I will hate is if this becomes like the same Groundhog Day scenario as they get good, they make the playoffs, and instead of improving, they trade everybody to rebuild again for some reason. That's the only bad thing about this Reds franchise is they have a tendency to pull the rug out from under you. They grew a great trade like this. Nick Krall had a very good trade deadline. He got a lot of prospects for a couple of guys who I didn't even think I mean, Tyler Naquin, Brandon Drury, two guys who were basically signed off the bargain bin and then got turned into prospects. I'll take that any day of the week. But the Luis Castillo trade, which was the trade that was going to be the moneymaker, the trade that was going to have the hugest haul, the best talent, and it did. And it did. They got a lot of really good players from Seattle. Some people think the Seattle farm system is pretty mid, but with the highlights I've seen of the guys they've gotten, I am not going to be commenting on that right now because I think they're dead wrong because these guys do not look mid at all to me. But yeah, and then I think Seattle, much like San Diego, is just trying to prove that they're involved in trying to make the playoffs. It seems to be a little bit easier in the AL. It's a lot more muddled out there than it is in the NL. You don't have as many super teams per se out there to contend with. And I mean, I don't know why also. I just really like the Mariners now because there's like 7 former Reds on the Mariners all of a sudden with Suarez, Winker, Castillo, Kurt Casales out there. I mean, I feel like I feel like I have to root for the Mariners now because reasons. Because I just have everybody the Reds cast it off. But no, it was a good trade. I think they got the perfect amount of value back for Luis Castillo, and I'm gonna miss him every day. But it was cathartic watching him get like 6 runs of support in the first inning because I'm like, that never happened in Cincinnati. That never happened. And so I think it's a good move for the Mariners, of course, because I love Luis Castillo. He's got great stuff out there. I think it's a good move for the Reds. They continue to rebuild, get younger, and they've got so many seemingly like incredibly athletic prospects now that I hope that the franchise can actually do something with this group instead of we repeat this conversation in 3.5 years like we're having it now in the midst of an abysmal season. But for a team that started 3-22, the moves they've made and they've been playing pretty well since that point. It's not as bad as it could be. So I will admit that.
Matt, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance
Oh God.
because you didn't want to be offensive towards my Cardinals, and I appreciate that, even though you were more than welcome to. But I guess I'm going to be very offensive towards your Reds. You said that they have clearly shown that they don't care about winning this year. But when was the last time they did care about winning? Because I can't remember them.
2 years ago.
Well, that's true. Fair point. But it always seems like this is a
Right back to
common
Valley.
narrative. This is a common narrative that I always feel like we see with the Reds. That they grow this elite talent and they end up trading them for prospects to, the Mariners in this case, or, some team that can afford to pay big money. The Reds just remind me of the NLAs, like the NL Moneyball A's. So to me personally, it's a very common trend for them, and I'm not surprised. But as for Castillo, he goes to the Mariners, and I think they give him another. I mean, it gives him another good starting pitcher next to Logan Gilbert, and a team that's currently with the 7th best ERA in baseball. I mean, that's got to help that in some way, shape, or form. But I think if we can get that trademark for the Reds that the Reds are the NLAs, I think I would be very happy with that.
What do you mean NLA?
Like the NLAs, the
Oh,
NL
the A.
Athletics.
Okay. You should have said A's of the NL. That would have, because I was like, does NLA stand for something?
The NL or the
What?
NLAs, the NL Athletics.
Okay. I mean, no, I mean, it's not totally inaccurate. And part of that is the ownership. I mean, I can't, you saw the comments that the Castellinis made, like, where are you going to go? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like now, and I feel like the Bengals being good is the best thing for the Reds because now there is pressure. They are going to go to the Reds. The Reds practice, the Bengals, I mean, the Bengals practice this week had more attendance than any Reds home game, I think, until like this Friday. So, I mean, it's pretty, I feel like the Bengals being good is the best thing for the Reds, which is really weird to say, but I, I do agree that the ownership needs to at least be a little bit more steadfast in its decision to either go for it or just admit that they don't know what they're doing. Because, like I said, you can't tell a fan base where are you going to go when they ask you questions. But I do like this crop of guys. Like I said, the one thing I did admit this in the thing, I just hope this time around that when they get good, they commit to it instead of just, oh well, we fell short in the NLDS, throw your hands up and then trade everybody. That just doesn't make any sense to me. That's more of a hey, let's get better situation rather than where are you gonna go, fans? To me,
And that's kind of what
I'm
plays
not.
into my NLAs. I mean, because they can never
Yeah.
keep they can never keep that talent that they build up through the organization.
That being said, at least we don't play in the Coliseum. That place, oof,
That's
oof.
fair.
At least Great American Ballpark is a nice place to go, and you don't have to worry about raw sewage.
So overall, you said you're pleased with the Reds' trade deadline moves.
Yeah, even the Tyler Molly move was pretty good for me. I mean, getting 4 prospects back, including a guy who could come up like today in the third baseman from the St. Paul Twins. I'm okay with that. Tyler Molly will do very well in a larger ballpark because that's something even I noticed as a Reds fan is that we called it the home Molly. He was terrible at home, but the minute
Mm-hmm.
you took him on the road, the guy was pitching like Sandy Koufax because Great American Ballpark is just if you hit a fly ball, it's going into the river. That's
Mm-hmm.
just how the ballpark is situated. But now that he's going to Minnesota, it's a deep ballpark with deep dimensions and oddities abounding throughout it. I think he's going to be fine. The Twins had the highest ERA of anybody who's actually in playoff contention in baseball.
Oh,
And
somebody
you've
wants to
got to
join
imagine.
us.
Oh, no, not Bean. Oh no, he's ruining my Twins take. No, I'm kidding. He can be ruined the Twins take.
Now continue.
And the thing about the Twins too is with the worst ERA for a contending team, they're also in a. I didn't think the Twins would be here, to be honest with you. When you told me about the AL Central, I was like, White Sox. It's gonna be the
Hmm.
freaking White Sox. Look at the White Sox. And instead, it's been like one disaster after another for Chicago. The Guardians, out of nowhere, thanks to Jose Ramirez, are like a great spoiler team who can come and like surprise you when you least expect it. And somehow the Twins with
Are in
Carlos
first
Correa,
place.
yeah, they're in first place, but it does seem more precarious to me because they just didn't have the pitching they needed. But then they got the pitching in Mali. They got probably the best reliever in the market in Jorge Lopez. They got Philip Fulmer from Detroit. So they addressed that need pretty dang well. Their offense was pretty okay. And I mean Byron Buxton, when he's healthy, is an absolute menace. He is a great baseball player. And I absolutely love every chance I get to watch Minnesota play simply because I love his style of play out there in the outfield. But it really just felt like a precarious position to be in for the Twins as a contender with an inflated ERA in a high power division, and they've addressed that need. And the Reds benefited from that too. 4 prospects, all very good. Like I said, but the point still stands from the Luis Castillo talk, which is what the hell did they do with it? Do they
Hmm.
keep it? Do they try to win? No. Bean's gonna say something. I have a feeling he's gonna say something. You are a fool to discredit the White Sox. The White Sox are going to come back and destroy you all. I love the White Sox.
What's that, bud?
Bean's a White Sox fan.
No, actually, Bean's next question is a very similar question that I was going to ask. As we
Uh-oh.
talk about the Twins, and they made some of the most moves that of any team during the trade deadline period. That always begs the question: when you have that much of a roster shakeup, do you think that's going to affect chemistry? Because, like we said, they're 2 games above the Guardians in the AL Central right now. Do you think that much of a roster shakeup at this point in the season could affect their chemistry heading into the playoffs?
I don't think so, mostly because it's pitchers.
Mm-hmm.
If they like traded a positional player, because that was one of the things I was going to say when we were discussing the Josh Hader trade, is there were some people in that Chicago Milwaukee pitching staff who were like, "Why did we do this? What was the point in this?" And I haven't seen anything like that from the Minnesota Twins. And the other thing with the Twins is that their pitching has been off all season. Kenta Mieda has been hurt. They've had a lot of pitchers who have been hurt. So I would say that they don't really have much chemistry on the pitching staff to begin with. So I don't think adding in these guys will affect too much of that chemistry the way like an offensive guy would.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as long as those guys pitch well and don't say anything like stupid,
Yeah.
which you never know. Like I hate Minnesota. Why didn't I go to Green Bay or something? I think it's going to be just fine. Pitchers are islands to themselves.
Right.
They're part of the team, but they've got their own routine. They've got their own things they go through. So with pitchers, I think that they're going to be just fine.
So that being said, let's go down the line. You and I have both talked about our teams during the trade deadline because we're approaching about 10 minutes left before we have to get off. We've talked about Luis Castillo, talked about Juan Soto. One of the other big moves that I think we not getting a lot of attention right now is my man Thor himself, Noah Syndergaard, being traded to the Phillies for 3 prospects. Matt, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it was a good move. No, he hasn't been himself, and that's partially because of injury and partially because LA is a train wreck. But the Phillies need pitching. They got pitching. They also from the Angels acquired a center fielder whose name is escaping me right now, who makes up for the lack of defense they have with Schwarber and Castellanos out there. 2 guys with amazing bats and amazing offensive prowess. Not the best defensive guys, and I'm looking up that guy's name right now because I feel like a jerk if I can't remember it. But yeah, the Phillies needed to make some moves. They need to make a splash. That was a good move. Brandon Marsh is the guy I'm thinking of,
Okay.
also from the Angels. Center fielder, good defensively, makes up for the lack thereof in the game of Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos. And of course, you've got the Phillies just need to, the Phillies are you talked about the how the Reds are like the A's of the NL. The Phillies just feel like some team from long ago whose name who I can't remember. They feel like the old school Phillies, where it's like they had all these great bats and stuff, and and you
The
always they would
Phillies feel like the Phillies.
yeah, but like the you know what I'm talking about,
I know what
2010,
you mean. It sounds
2009,
funny, but I know what you mean.
where they had all those great bats, but they would get, and then the pitching was so. And then
Hmm.
they'd sign Cliff Lee or Pedro Martinez, who were like 40 years old, still great players, but they weren't who they were. And then they'd end up like in the playoffs in like game five, and you'd be like, how the hell did this happen?
Hmm.
Because that's just who they are. And I feel like this is kind of what they're re-embracing in Philadelphia with that. So Philly's made some good moves too. Marsh being in center field, I think, is going to make more of a difference than Syndergaard pitching. And I know that sounds weird to say, but that's just how vacuous that Phillies outfield could be.
Like I think you hit the nail on the head. The Phillies need a pitching. And of course, the Marvel fan in me can never, ever hate a guy whose nickname is Thor. I've always been a Noah Syndergaard advocate myself. So very good acquisition for the Phillies. And now, with that being said, I feel like that wraps up all the big names and the big topics we wanted to talk about. So that leaves the very end for this right here. Matt, we need to pick one winner and one loser. So if you had to pick a winner and a loser, who would it be?
Winner's definitely the Twins for all the reasons I said. They mostly traded away guys at positions for prospects at positions where they already had guys. They got what they needed, which was pitching. Bats will come later. My loser, though, I would actually say the Chicago Cubs. They traded away a lot of their relief pitchers for, prospects, minor leaguers, stuff like that. But everyone was expecting Wilson Contreras and Ian Happ to move, and they didn't. And now the thing for the Cubs is going to become, do you sign them to a large deal when the offseason rolls around, or do you let them walk? And anytime you let someone go past the trade deadline with a deal like that, you're risking getting nothing. And if you get nothing, the fans are going to let you hear something, and it ain't going to be pretty. So that's why I would pick the Chicago Cubs. And it's weird to pick them because I'm picking them because of the trades they didn't make as a seller instead of the trades they didn't make as a buyer. But yeah, I'm gonna go Twins winner, Cubs loser.
So for my winner, I'm going to go with a team that you are not convinced is a World Series contender, and the San Diego Padres. I think they added to the rotation with the best relief pitcher in baseball. You make a move like Soto. I mean, at the very least, this grabs the attention of the city. This is great for marketing. This is great for business, and it's great for star power. And you know, the expectations are high, but I think they just got that much better. And I think Vegas has them moved into sixth place on World Series odds. I think they're even higher than that. So I have to go with the Padres for making the big splash as the trade deadline winner. And my loser is a team that didn't make a splash at all and is currently last place in their division, and that's the Boston Red Sox. They're used to going being neck and neck consistently on a annually basis with the Yankees of being the top teams in the AL East. Usually, I know people are going to say, "Oh, what about the Rays this year? Whatever." Or Rays a couple years back, or here and there, the Jays, yada yada. I get it. We all know the AL East as the Red Sox and the Yankees division. The Red Sox currently in last place. They made absolutely no moves to even help improve them to end the season out. So I got to give them as a loser. And shout out to one of my coworkers, Mike Marcy, who he and I talked about it. And that's all I got.
The Red Sox are another one of those teams who could have made that move. They could have traded JD Martinez. And I
They
think
didn't.
that would have gotten them a pretty decent sized haul, but they just held back on that and instead acquired Eric Hosmer, which
Who was it a couple years ago who said JD Martinez had the potential to be like the best hitter in baseball history?
I forgot who said it, but I remember it was back during their World Series run. Yeah. And
That
now
aged poorly. Poorly.
that did age quite poorly. I mean, he's still a good player, but let's not kid ourselves.
One of the best hitters ever. I'm sorry. I mean, I was listening to
That's
one
Minnesota.
baseball analyst a while back, and he said that Albert Pujols isn't a top 10 hitter of all time. Well, if Albert Pujols is not a top 10 hitter of all time, JD Martinez is nowhere near the top.
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense to me at all. But so that's our baseball. Would you like to end though, Les, on a non sequitur final question from yours truly?
Yes, I would love to.
All right, Les. The Pro Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony was yesterday. And of course, you know how it goes. Five guys get in. And Les, next year we got a real big group of first round, first ballot kind of guys coming in. We've got Dwight Freeney, Darrell Rivas, Joe Thomas. We got a lot of James Harrison. There are a lot of really good guys who are eligible for the Hall of Fame for the first time next season. Les, who do you think of that group? Let's just go with James Harrison, Darrell Rivas,
Hmm.
Joe Thomas, and Dwight Freeney. Who of those three? Who would you vote on your first ballot to make a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Um,
Only one.
only one.
Only one.
Look, I know the Colts fan in me wants to say Freeney, and he makes a very solid case. He was one of the better pass rushers of his era. That being said, if I had one choice, I have to 100% go Darrell Rivas
I
because
respect.
because for this reason and this reason only, Darrell Rivas is the best lockdown corner I have ever seen. I have seen left tackles that can block as good as Thomas. I mean, not many, but I've seen it. Freeney, as great of a pass rusher as he was not the most dominant pass rusher of his era, and et cetera, et cetera. But there was no corner that I have ever seen in my lifetime that could lock down your best receiver like Darrell Rivas. Darrell Rivas should make the Hall of Fame off of his 2009 season alone, not to mention what he did after that. So yes, my one pick, I have to go with Darrell Rivas. So with that being said, I think that's all the time we have for today. Be sure to like and subscribe to the Less is More Sports YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to Less is More Sports on Spotify, and like Less is More Sports on the social media platforms of Twitter, Facebook, etc. Until next time, Matt and I are out.
Yep. We'll see you guys next time. Joe Thomas was my pick.
Joe Thomas, that's a pretty solid pick as well.
I will
But
go
yeah,
with him.
that is all the time we have today. We are out.
College football next week. Be there.
Be there or be square, because you're not
Amen.
around.
Oh God.